Breaking news from yesterday. Penn State football has a news update, and as we said, this one not so great. Former Penn State guard, at this point, I should say starting guard, Landon Tengwall announced his retirement from football due to an injury. James Franklin made a statement about that after practice. Fitz, I'll come to you. You wrote the article for us at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Take us through what he said on social media and your initial reaction to the news.
Well, the initial reaction first. It sucks, man. Like, I understand. It's football. It comes with expected consequences sometimes. And unfortunately, for a guy like Landon, who has lived and breathed football since the time I met him or talked to him, 8th, 9th grade, whatever that was, this kid has been all about football. He has been all about Penn State football for a long time as well, nearly as long as that. And so to see a guy who is dedicated, he's a young guy, but dedicated most of his life to being what he was expected to be, which was a starting offensive lineman for Penn State. I can't emphasize enough how much it sucks. Like, this is, all of a sudden just gone. Like, it's like losing, a loved one. It's terrible for him, for a guy that was, he's just a redshirt sophomore, but a leader, a guy that a lot of people look to as somebody that could right this ship on the offensive line and certainly help that. And unfortunately missed most of the season last year. But this was a guy that they were counting on for a couple of years, and it was a big time recruit when he signed on board. It was a big time, one of those guys that could stabilize things on the offensive line. And Penn State's done a great job righting the ship, obviously, there. Phil Troutwine, I think, has done a wonderful job. Frank Leonard's been a key piece of that as well. But like, this is one that you didn't draw up. And that's kind of what sucks sometimes when you're talking about college football. Not a situation where you can go out and sign a replacement as if you're a pro or anything like that. But it's just, it's tough to stomach. I mean, we learned of this, recently. Don't want to put a timeline on, but it's just one of those gut punches, and you don't want to believe it. Like, you don't want to believe it's true. And for that to happen, for that to come along in the way that it did, just sucks, man. And there's really no way getting around that.
Yeah, he was really one of the first guys in that signal of Penn State was recruiting a different level of offensive lineman, really one of the first guys to come in. And I know Fashanu a year older, but kind of that 3-star prospect that developed. Landon was a high-profile 4-star guy, and just very frustrating, as you, I think, outlined very well there. Nate, James Franklin's comments yesterday, what did you take away from those, and can you give us the gist of what he had to say about Landon's situation?
Yeah, I mean, certainly he wanted to keep it fairly brief, right? I think that it's a moment of challenge for Landon and his family, and certainly for the Penn State football team. I do think it's interesting. Sean just did a story this summer with Jordan Minor, and last weekend, I don't know who saw it, but obviously Journey Brown, working in a NASCAR pit crew, right? Which is in no way making light of Landon's situation. It's only to say that there's life after football for a lot of these guys. And, there should be some level of optimism. Landon's such a bright kid. He's such a talented kid, a guy who is really engaging, easy to get along with, has always been very good with the media. Like, he will have a great life, right? Like, he will have a great life ahead of him. And so while this moment is a tough one for him and for his family to get through and to stomach that, something that is his first love of football is not going to be there for him moving forward in the same capacity. It doesn't mean that there's nothing there for him moving forward. He's got the world in front of him and will do great things moving on.
It's one of those situations where, we've all interacted with Landon. I think we all think highly of him in our interactions with him. But football is the reality. They have to make a plan for what comes next, and they've had more time to make that plan. But Ryan asks the question in the chat, which I think everyone was thinking from the moment this news was announced: really feel bad for Landon. As for the team, how does this change rotation at guard and the depth at that position? That's something that James Franklin didn't want to get into last night. He didn't really want to talk about in that situation, but it's obviously something we can talk about here, and that we have a pretty good sense of what it will be. Fitz, coming back to you for this one. What do you see as far as the guys that need to step up into that void, and not just JB Nelson, who I know we'll start with, but how does this change the depth behind him and maybe the plans for the other guard position? We're on mute. Got you on mute there, Fitz.
I got you. One quick point on Landon that you started with. He was the guy that would seek you out, like when we had team functions and things like that, to ask how your family was, ask how everything was. So that's why, this is one of those kids that it hits harder a little bit, because you know how much that meant to him and everything meant to him. So I just wanted to get that in there as well. From a depth perspective, from a starting perspective, JB Nelson's been the guy since Tengwall went down early in camp, and was going to be a battle anyway. We talked about that back in the spring. JB had a really good spring, a guy that Penn State really likes as a kind of a brawler in there at guard. He's huge. Like, I don't think you realize how big this kid is. We talk how big Vega is. JB's roughly the same size, maybe built a little bit differently in terms of shape, but like, he is a massive dude, and he's probably one of the meaner guys. I think James said a couple of weeks ago, one of the meaner guys on the offensive line, but it's more about technicality, technical standpoint, all that stuff. Anyway, but JB Nelson's going to be in the spotlight. This is a situation where JB was going to be the guy splitting reps and also taking reps at the fourth tackle spot, which that kind of changes things. Every hit on the offensive line, as we saw last year in November, every hit has a ripple effect where you are going to lose guys at other spots. You're going to have guys just, that you maybe have to burn a red shirt or something like that for. So it goes with Nelson, and then it goes to Vega Ioane, the guy that is the top backup at right guard. I have him as the top backup at left guard as well. Like, this is I don't want to say it's not rocket science, because playing offensive line is very hard, but he's got to be prepared to play both of those positions. I think people are going to look at Hunter Norzad at center and say, why can't he slide back to guard? Well, you want to keep your center like intact all the way. That's why when you see them do rotations with different quarterbacks, with different other offensive linemen, the center is usually the guy that leads the team. I think Juice led the team in snaps last year. That's for a reason. You want to keep continuity there at the center position. So I don't bring him into the conversation. Can bring Nick Dawkins into the conversation a little bit, because Penn State likes to cross-train those guys. And if you're not the starting center, then you have an opportunity to provide value as a guard as well. So Nick Dawkins is right there. And then you move to the freshman Anthony Donka, who is really surprised some people through camp. Still see him ideally as a 4-game guy, a 4-game redshirt guy. But that's the way to look at it right there. And then you have the ripple effect, as I mentioned, without playing Nelson at tackle, you've got to figure out the fourth tackle situation. Drew Shelton, obviously the third tackle, could be a guard as well. We've seen him play guard at Penn State in the year that he's been on campus. So that's an option as well. And then you've got Javen Williams, who can potentially play a little bit more because of the situation. So that's kind of what you've got with the personnel there. I think
Can
that
I ask
Vega,
you?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to kind of dig in a little bit here in just one comparison to last year, where injuries happened, kind of in a snowball effect in the middle of the season. Penn State already off, starting with one on the offensive line now. How do you feel about the depth of talent this year as opposed to last year, where you're digging into some of those freshmen and playing guys and it's super thin at certain positions, but with Drew Shelton another year in the program, with Vega Ioane another year in the program, is it a same feeling as last year because Javen Williams has to be that potentially fourth tackle, or is it a different vibe this year?
I think it's a little bit of a different vibe. I think if you add Dawkins into the equation, you feel a little bit better about where things stands there. It's still about the same as numbers, and Penn State's progressively gotten deeper on the offensive line. You feel great going into the season with Tengwall and Nelson at left guard, Norzad and Dawkins at center, Wormley and Ioane at right guard. Like 6 guys that's great. Like that would be great depth. And of course, any hit that you take is going to have that effect on the rest of the roster, the rest of that room. So I feel a little bit better. I can't stress enough how important that class of 2022, like when you've got the JUCO kid in Nelson, you've got Shelton, who played as a true freshman, you've got Ioane, who you think can play legitimate reps as a redshirt freshman. This isn't a situation where you're bringing a guy in and you hope that he can stand in front of somebody and get in somebody's way. They hope that Vega, can be a guy that is actually playing at a starter level. So you hope that those guys are there where you project them to be. No hit no injury hit on the offensive line is going to be good. Like you're going to have to scramble at times, and Penn State did that very well last year. Even though we kind of romanticize it because it worked out so well, but you remember those things were like gritty.
It wasn't
like
great.
It wasn't beautiful. Drew Shelton played really well for a freshman. He did not play at the level that the other tackles were playing, but it's still great. I mean, it's still awesome. Don't get me wrong here. Now he's got to take that next step to playing well as a college football player, not just as a freshman. Will that be as the third tackle? Yes. And James Franklin made an important distinction this week, saying he's played well on both sides. He was not playing well on the right side in the spring. So him bouncing back and having that versatility, I can see him at 3 different positions this fall. He's a very important piece of this offensive line room.